Super Mario Bros. Is widely regarded as the most well-understood game. It's been picked apart. People have studied every line of code. Everything's been figured out. In speedruns for this game, the record has steadily been pushed toward perfection, but the known theoretical limit it can go to hasn't budged for 15 years. Everybody knows Super Mario Bros., and it seems like we know pretty much everything about Super Mario Bros. That's why it's a big deal if anything new is found in this game. So, what if I told you that we might have found not just something new in this game, but the biggest thing you could find? See, there's a particular exploit that's possible in some games called arbitrary code execution, and it's the holy grail of glitches. People will make lists to track every game that it's found in. It's a really fascinating technique and a big deal when it's possible in any game. Last year, arbitrary code execution, or ACE for short, was found in the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2, aka The Lost Levels. And this year, we've been working on making it happen in SMB 1. In this video, I'll explain arbitrary code execution and the journey we've been on to make it happen in the original game. I'm not going to confirm right now exactly whether we've gotten it to work yet, but I promise it's not because I'm doing a YouTuber thing that's like, make sure you watch till the end to find out. No, it's because I want you to experience the same roller coaster ride that we've been on as we've tried to make this thing happen. So buckle up, because this is gonna be an insane ride. This video is possible thanks to today's sponsor, FlexiSpot. FlexiSpot makes ergonomic furniture, and today we'll be focusing on the C7 Max. This thing really has all the features you could dream of in an office chair. A headrest, a footrest, lumbar support, and it's all extremely customizable. Like seriously, move each piece to exactly where you want it. I am super short, but I could still get the headrest and the lumbar support in the right spot. If either of these aren't hitting you right, you can adjust the seat depth, the backrest height, or move the headrest all around. And normally, I don't even attach the armrests onto my office chairs. They bump into my desk, and I like to sit in weird positions. But you can adjust the height on these and put them in any position you want. Plus, this thing reclines, so you can kick back and relax when you need a break. The C7 Max is designed for those who sit long hours during the day, and the model they sent me has this mesh seat for breathability and staying cool. FlexiSpot has a 30-day return policy and a 10-year warranty. If you're interested, click the link in the description and use code C730 to get $30 off one of the C7 model chairs. Alright, so I'm going to start off by explaining how ACE was discovered in Mario 2J and how it works, so you can understand and follow along with our attempts to make it happen in SMB 1. So, first of all, who found this glitch? Was it the speedrun world record holder? Or the person who made the tool-assisted run? Was it a collaboration by the greatest minds in Mario speedrunning? No, it was one casual player, and his name is Luigi's Sidekick. Our journey starts off with him doing a casual playthrough of Mario 2J, The Lost Levels. He's playing it through the Nintendo Switch online service and documenting his playthrough as he goes. Now let me tell you, this guy was destined for greatness. During his playthrough, he despawned this platform in 7.2 by accident. I'd never seen this before, and when I tried to go replicate it, I had a tough time getting it to happen on purpose. Anyway, Luigi's Sidekick eventually arrived at 8.4, the final level of the main quest in this game. He's making his way through the stage, and then... that's weird. What happened? I think most of us would guess it's just some random error, or maybe an issue with the Switch Online service. But here's where the brilliant video game scientists come in. When they see something like this, there is one thing on their mind. Can this lead to ACE? Alright, it's time to talk more about ACE. What it is, how it works, and why people go looking for it when they see a game crash like this. ACE, as I mentioned before, is arbitrary code execution. The arbitrary here basically means we get to choose. So this glitch means we choose what code the game executes. You can basically make the game do whatever you want. That's why it's the holy grail of glitches. You may have seen some crazy examples of it in games like Pokemon, Zelda Ocarina of Time, or in other 2D Mario games like Mario World. So, how does it work exactly? There's some fundamental principles of computer science that you'll need to understand here, but I'm going to do my absolute best to help anyone who stumbles on this video be able to follow along. First, one thing you have to understand is that in computers, everything is just numbers. I mean everything. Text, pictures, enemies in a game, the game code itself, it's all just numbers. And those numbers are interpreted differently in different contexts. For example, have you ever tried to open a file and you see something like this? This is what happens when you try to read something as text, which is not meant to be read as text. Or like the minus world in Super Mario Bros. Is literally the same thing. The game is reading data that is not meant to be level data to generate this level. And the numbers it finds there just happen to match up with the 7-2 area. So that's what we get. Or you especially can see this on the Famicom Disk System version of the game. Due to code changes they made to port the game to this disk, the game now finds different numbers when loading the minus world. And those numbers clearly line up with the 1-3 area, but the area type being a water level, and especially the enemies, they are clearly a bunch of random data that's nonsensical and not meant to be level data. So yeah, as I said, everything in computers has a number associated with it. Every letter of text has an associated number. Every enemy in Super Mario Bros. Has an enemy ID. Every pixel in a picture has numbers telling the computer what color that pixel should be. Now, this is also true for code. Here's an example of some code that's in Super Mario Bros. The game's code is a list of instructions telling the game what to do next, all in order. Things like add these two numbers together, for example. Or one very important instruction is a jump instruction. It means jump over to this other section of code, which should be ran now. Like if a piranha plant is on screen, we need to jump to the code for piranha plants. Every one of these instructions has a number associated with it. So like whenever the game is executing code and finds a 76, that's a jump instruction. And the next number it finds tells it where to jump to. Alright, following so far? Because here's where we get to how ACE happens. ACE basically means we have a way to feed the game exactly which numbers come next, or which instructions it should execute. You may be familiar with ACE happening in some other games, and you've heard things like, we execute the position of enemies as code. Or in The Legend of Zelda, they execute the file name as code. Or a very common one across the board is executing controller inputs as code. What does this mean exactly, and how does it happen? Well, in computers, or on your video game cartridge, there are different sections of memory. One segment is where the game's code is stored. All the numbers the game is meant to execute as instructions. But then there are other sections of memory which aren't meant to be read as instructions. They're meant to hold things like all the level data, the graphics, the music, stuff like that. And there's also a very important area of memory for what we're talking about today, which is called RAM. RAM is space the game can freely store numbers to and retrieve them whenever it needs them. So, like in Mario, how many lives do you currently have? That number is stored somewhere in RAM, and when the game needs to update your life count, or check how many lives you have to know if you just game overed, it uses a particular spot in RAM for that. Okay, now here's the crux of all of this. ACE typically happens from the game executing code outside of the code segment of memory. Like, there's some glitch which makes it jump here and start executing all of the numbers that are currently here in RAM as code instructions. So again, let's say the game jumped to this spot in RAM where your number of lives is stored. It's going to interpret your number of lives as the instruction it should do. This is where the arbitrary part of ACE comes in. We can control our number of lives, right? So we can now tell the game to execute any instruction we want. Like if we had 76 lives, that will tell it to do a jump instruction. I hope that makes sense, and you can see how we can control exactly what code the game executes once it has jumped to RAM. Now, one final key detail is it's really easy to crash the game during all this. Some numbers correspond to instructions that will just crash the game. Ace is a very delicate thing, and we basically have to be perfect to get the game to do exactly what we want and avoid crashing. Alright, hopefully that all made sense, and now it makes sense to you if you hear something like reading the positions of enemies as code or your file name as code. That means the game jumps to the place in memory where your file name is stored, and then each one of these letters corresponds to a specific instruction you want the game to run. Whew, we made it through explaining Ace. That's what it is, and that's why whenever games crash, speedrunners always start researching to check what happened. They want to see if the game's execution jumped somewhere that they could manipulate. Overall, Ace is just a really cool and fascinating thing to discover and figure out in any game. Okay, now let's get back to what happened with Luigi's sidekick in Mario 2J. I'm now going to explain what happened here, how it led to Ace in this game, and then we'll look at how the same concept could apply in SMB 1. Earlier, I joked about how this was found not by the brilliant minds of the game, but by a random casual player. But in all seriousness, it was the brilliant minds in the community. Luigi's Sidekick's post made its way around various Discord servers until eventually, Simplistic saw it, one of our local brilliant minds. He saw a post from Takuika Ninja, who pointed out that this crash looked promising. It looked like data got written somewhere from it. Simplistic immediately started looking into it, trying to replicate it and reverse engineer it. And pretty soon, he traced the source of the crash. One of the enemy IDs became a weird value. Normally, enemies in this game are represented with numbers in roughly the 0 to 35 range. But when this crash happened, one of the enemy IDs became 84. Following the code some more, he found out exactly what's happening. There's one particular function in the game's code which is only used for two enemies in the game, Long Firebars and Bowser. It's used for them because they are actually built in two parts. Long Firebars are basically two firebars stuck together, and Bowser is made up of a top half and a bottom half. So what goes wrong in this function to cause the crash? Well, let's have a little crash course on objects in this game. In my videos, I'll talk a lot about things despawning. This is when an enemy or object just doesn't show up where it's supposed to. In the game's memory, there are spaces which we'll call object slots. There's 5 normal slots and 1 special slot, which only certain things can go into, like power-ups or the flag on the flagpole. In general, if these 5 main slots are full, then no enemies will spawn. Here, I'll use Lakitu to show this off. There's Lakitu and 4 Spinies on screen. So now no Piranha Plants will spawn in the pipes. And Lakitu refuses to throw any more Spinies. Once I get rid of one, now he'll start throwing them again. And during all of this, we can still make power-ups appear because they use the special object slot, which isn't taken up by Spinies. So that's how object slots work. Now, the way the game keeps track of whether the slots are full or not is there's actually 2 lists. One list just says, is there something in this slot? Yes or no, with 1 being yes and 0 being no. See, everything's a number, like I said. Now, the second list of the 2 holds the exact ID of the enemies. So Lakitu is 17, for example. Spinies are 18, and so on. Alright, now here's what happens exactly when an enemy spawns in. It will mark the first list with a 1 to say something is now occupying that slot. And then it will write the proper ID of that object into the ID list. Bowser and Long Firebars work a little differently, however. They come in 2 parts, right? The first half of them will mark a spot with a 1, like normal. But the second half will mark it with something like 84, a familiar number. That's how the game keeps track that this object is tied to one of the other objects. Okay, but now let's talk about what happens if all of these slots are full. I already explained what happens with regular enemies, but what about with Bowser and Long Firebars? If the 5 slots are full and they try to load, they actually won't spawn either. But remember, they take up 2 slots. So that leaves the question, what happens if only 1 slot is open? The first half will go in that open slot, and the second half will go in the power-up slot, and everything's still fine. But okay, what if that slot is full too? Now we're getting somewhere. The second half of a Bowser or Long Firebar will simply keep going until it finds a space in memory with 0 in it. that'll pretty much always be within the first object list. But if that list is all full, it will keep going past the object list. As it turns out, there's one spot of memory between the two lists, which is not used for anything. So our 84 will get written here. Either intentionally or not, this little bit of unused memory protects the 84 from getting written even further out of bounds. So, that didn't do anything. But what if we did the glitch again? Now that this spot is filled up, the next time around, it should go past this spot and keep going until it finds another 0. This can get the number 84 written to somewhere that it normally should not be. And that is exactly what happened to Luigi's sidekick here in 2J. Alright, let's take a step back and summarize this glitch so far. Let's consider everything we need to make it happen. This glitch, which I'll call the object overflow glitch, it happens when all the object slots are full, except one. And then we need to load either a long firebar or Bowser. Seems simple enough, but there's two big caveats. We need the power-up slot full, which we aren't able to do very often. And you need to do the glitch twice before anything will happen from it. Here, let's watch back Luigi's Sidekick's video and see all of these elements come into play. Right here, he's got 4 objects on screen, taking up the 4 needed regular slots, plus this poison mushroom, taking up the power-up slot. Then he loads this long firebar, and that's 1 overflow glitch down. Now, this spot in 8-4 is a maze, where if you don't take the right path, the room loops. So he goes through the room again, has all the same objects on screen, and bam! Game crashes when he loads the long firebar again. So yeah, that's what happened to him. But wait, what actually happens when you do this? Why does the game crash? How does this lead to Ace? Well, there's actually one final requirement for this to work. And it's that one of the enemies on screen needs to be a regular green Koopa. Not a red Koopa, not a Koopa Paratroopa, but just a plain Koopa Troopa. Green. The reason this is necessary is because green Koopas have the enemy ID of 0. So the second time doing the overflow glitch, when the duplicate firebar object is searching for an empty place in memory to go into, the first one it finds is the slot in the enemy ID list where the green Koopa is. As I mentioned earlier, enemies in this game are represented by numbers in the 0 to 35 range, and the game uses these enemy IDs to know what code it should run. There's this big list which is used to jump to the appropriate code for each enemy. So like ID 10 will go to the 10th spot in this list, ID 11 will go to the 11th spot, and so on. And the way this works is the ID for a Piranha Plant will match up with this spot for Move Piranha Plant, so the game will jump and go run the unique code for Piranha Plants. Okay, but with this overflow glitch, we're not giving the game an enemy ID between 0 and 35. We're giving it 84. That makes it read way past the list here. It finds a completely different value for where it should jump to than it normally would. And remember, that value tells it where it should jump to run code. That value tells it to jump to RAM. Ding, ding, ding. If you've been paying attention, you know what that means. The game will start executing whatever numbers it finds here in RAM as instructions, and we can manipulate those values in RAM. This is how Ace happens in this game. After Simplistic figured this out and shared his findings, a bunch of very knowledgeable members of the community hopped on board. They got to work figuring out exactly what instructions we want to make the game run, and how to manipulate memory to get those instructions. In addition to Simplistic, we got people like 3Creepio, 100th Coin, SBD Wolf, and others working on this. And within 24 hours of Simplistic seeing Luigi's Sidekick's post, we have our first video proving the potential that this will work. Over the next couple of days, everything was refined, and the final product looks like this. It looks pretty funny, actually. Mario just jumps in the lava, and you win! A lot of people like to point out that this is basically recreating the box art for Super Mario Bros., which is a really fun coincidence. Jumping in the lava actually isn't an important part of the trick though. The purpose of jumping down here is to take damage. Mario has to take damage as part of manipulating memory, and this is the fastest way to do it. But what is even hitting him? If you fall in lava in this game, you don't take damage, you just fall down and die. It's actually the long firebar that's hitting him. When you do the overflow glitch, it gets a really weird hitbox that jumps all over the place. So yeah, that's what's actually going on when he jumps down here. Anyway, there you have it. We jump straight to the Peach cutscene, and Ace exists in Mario 2J. This is a huge accomplishment. It's yet another 2D Mario game where it's been found. In a speedrunning context, this allows us to reach the ending cutscene an entire 19 seconds faster. The only place in the game to do it just happens to be the second to last room in the game. This room is just perfectly set up to make it possible. We have a long fire bar, a bunch of objects right before it, including this poison mushroom to fill the power-up slot, and this room loops, so we can do the glitch twice. If we go looking for anywhere else in the game to make this happen, remember, we need long fire bars or Bowsers. There are several levels with long fire bars, and most of those are castle stages, which also feature a Bowser. But the real main issue is filling up all the slots when we need to, especially that pesky power-up slot. It's rare to get a power-up right before a long fire bar or Bowser. There is one place in the game which is actually pretty close, and that's 4-4. We don't have all the slots full at this first long fire bar, but there's another one down the hall. And there's also a mushroom right here, which we can just barely keep on screen long enough for the next fire bar to load in. The problem now, actually, is filling the regular slots. There should be enough with this Koopa, these two Goombas, and this small fire bar, but we can't actually get both Goombas to load. The first long fire bar is still loaded when it's time for the Goombas to come on screen, and it's hogging up slots, so there's not room for the second one. It's actually so close though. If we just moved this long fire bar a couple blocks to the left, we'd have it. But okay, let's just pretend that this worked. We would still need a second spot in the stage to do the overflow glitch. There is the Bowser at the end of the level, which we can easily fill up all the regular slots before. And we can even bring a green Koopa with us over here. But again, the power-up slot is just too hard to fill. There is a mushroom right here, but it goes off screen well before we reach Bowser. In some alternate universe where this worked out, here's what a speedrun of this game could look like. I built a silly looking bridge to bring the power up over toward Bowser, and voila! The game crashes. We could ace from here, which would save like 4 minutes. But that's not the world we live in. So with that wishful thinking aside, 8-4 is all we've got. Let's now take a look at what speedrunners have done with it. Thanks to work from people like Lakuki, Nifsky, and Hitscrits, a viable method was found to do this in real-time runs. This setup uses the position of Mario's fireballs, this poison mushroom, and the position of this floating score number to make the correct ace instructions happen. Here's an explanation I made previously to explain what goes into pulling all of that off. How many frame perfects? Okay, the jump off the first pipe is a 2-frame window. The jump into the coin block is a 2-frame window. The jump onto the pipe is a frame perfect 1-frame jump. So you have to flick the button so you get the shortest jump possible. It's like double frame perfect. You have to frame perfectly jump for only 1 frame. Then it's a frame perfect fireball. Well, really B press so that you start running at the right moment. So like the floating score number despawns on the right pixel. Then it's a frame perfect A plus B when you jump into the corner. That pixel perfect despawns your fireball at the right position. And then it's a frame perfect fireball, the blooper. And then it's a precise speed crouch jump into the poison mushroom block. It's just precise and like really hard to control. And after all of that, you have a 3-frame window to land in the lava, like to let go of jump to land in the right place. So yep, that's how we can jump to the Peach cutscene with arbitrary code execution. This is its own category, the Ace category on the leaderboards. I know it's kind of weird, and no one thinks this is like actually the same as beating the game normally. It's just its own interesting thing, and amazing that it's possible at all. Plus, it's super hard if you couldn't tell. Nifsky was the first person to do this in a run with a 7:39, 12 seconds faster than the record without Ace. A little bit after that, I got a run that was just shy of a 7:38, and shortly after that, Scalpel got an actual 7:38. And then recently, I returned to the category and got a lower 7:38, so that's where the record stands today. There is one glaring mistake in the run, and more strategies you could add in to reach 8-4 faster, but it's just really hard to hit this at the end of a run. Still, I think this could eventually go down to at least a 735 or so at some point in the future. Anyway, yeah, that's the story of Ace in Mario 2J. I think it's really cool, and hopefully you were able to follow along and understand how it works. But alright, it's time to move on. Everything up to this point has been a primer, so you can follow along with the second half of this video. It's time for what you've all been waiting for, trying to make Ace happen in SMB 1. One thing I do need to get out of the way right up front, you might be a little confused at this point. Maybe you've already seen this video by 100th coin of Ace happening in Super Mario Bros. Yes, there is a way to do it, but you have to do things in other games first, then swap cartridges over to Mario in order to make it work. We want to do Ace in just SMB1 alone, with no outside help. So, anyway, when Ace was found in 2J, people naturally asked, can this be done in SMB1? And the consensus has always been, no. There's nowhere in the game that you can do this. You need 2 long fire bars, or a long fire bar and Bowser, or 2 Bowsers. There's nowhere in the game like that. There's exactly 1 long fire bar in all of SMB1, and it's in 5-4. Sure, there's also a Bowser at the end of the level, but we're nowhere close to meeting the conditions for the overflow glitch, either with the long fire bar or at Bowser. So yeah, there's nowhere in any of the levels that meets the conditions we need. Well, not in the normal levels at least, but maybe we could go to some kind of special level. A glitched level? Maybe the minus world? No, that's not gonna help us. The minus world is just a copy of a regular level, 7-2. Okay, but what about that different version of the minus world on the Famicom Disk System version of the game? Huh, now this is actually a new level. But come on, I've seen minus world ending speedruns. I'm familiar with this. There's still nowhere to do the glitch. Sure, there's 1 Bowser right here, but we can't fill up slots before reaching him, and that's just 1 Bowser. There's only 1 Bowser. Oh man. What do we have here? 2 Bowsers? Wait, there's stuff past this flagpole? What all is back here? Well, even if this Bowser is here, we're still gonna need another one. Oh, wow. This is starting to look pretty possible. Okay, but wait, there's that secret final requirement we need. We need enemy ID 0 for the duplicate object to load into. We need a Koopa? Oh man, there's 3 of them right there. Oh boy. Wait, oh, I know. This one will do it for sure. What about the power-up slot? That's always really hard to fill, right? Oh, what's that? The star flag at the end of the level can go in the power-up slot? And it stays there permanently? Oh boy. What about the other enemy slots? Are those filled up enough? We gotta pull this level data up and take a look at this. Okay, there's a decent number of things near this Bowser. Wait, is that a long fire bar? Oh, dude. All right, what about the second Bowser? Wow, there's just a huge mess of enemies right there. Okay, this is definitely looking possible, inevitable. Like, there's no chance with all of these factors that it doesn't work at this point, right? Wrong! Cut the theatrics. I'm gonna show you how insanely, massively, extremely frustrating this level is. It's like it conspired against us to be almost possible in every conceivable way, but it just won't work. I'll show you how this beetle right here and this princess right here, they've been ruining our lives for months. Ooh. So, anyway, that was a taste of the emotions that I've had here working on trying to make Ace happen in World -1. 3Creepio reached out to me a few months ago to show me the situation, that there's a ton of stuff beyond the flagpole in this level that we can try to do Ace with. And I am serious when I say it is so insanely close in so many ways. Let me show you. First, let's look at what we're working with in terms of object slots. In some ways, it's actually pretty cool the way this works out here. See, Bowser and these Princess Peach objects, they always normally appear right at the end of levels. So here, when they appear in the minus world, they actually never unload when they scroll off screen, because in normal gameplay, they never scroll off screen. So they'll fill up object slots permanently. by the time we get past the flagpole, we already have 4 slots permanently taken up. 2 from the 2 princesses, and 2 more from this Bowser. We also have the power-up slot filled by the star flag that hides behind the castle, and that one never unloads after going off screen either. So all of this to say that when we reach this point, we're perfectly set up for the overflow glitch on this Bowser. 1 open slot and the rest filled. Nice. But wait, now all of the slots are full, and with the addition of this Bowser, everything in here is stuff that never unloads. So nothing is ever going to load again after this. How will we do the overflow glitch on the second Bowser? Well, there's a fun solution for this. Here, watch carefully when I kill Bowser with fireballs right here. Did you notice that? When he hit the bottom of the screen, it wasn't just Bowser that disappeared. The fireball disappeared too. Once Bowser falls all the way down, the game actually just deletes all the objects. So here in the minus world, if we defeat him with fireballs, that will free up the object slots for us. And conveniently, this does not clear the power-up slot, which is huge. Now, let's go look at the next Bowser. We have to swim forward for a while until we reach him. We pass 1 princess on the way, which fills up 1 slot. Now, we just need 3 more objects when Bowser loads in, and that's boom, GG, ace. So yeah, let's head on over to Bowser, and this should be easy. Alright, we've got a blooper, a buzzy beetle. What? That's it? There's no way we're short on objects. Weren't there 1 billion when we looked at the level data? Yeah, there are. That's so weird. A lot of them must not be spawning in. Alright, here's what's going on. The enemies and objects all come in an ordered list like this, and the game works on spawning them one at a time. Now, normally, the objects in this list would all be in a sensible order, from left to right. But let's consider what would happen if they were out of order. Here, we've got a Goomba, and then a little ways past it, we have a Koopa. But the Koopa comes first in the object list. What will happen? Looks like the Goomba never spawned. This is because the game is waiting for the Koopa to load in before moving on to work on spawning the Goomba. But by the time the Koopa loads, the place where the Goomba should load in is already well on screen. If it loaded in now, it would just pop into existence out of thin air. That would be weird. I bring all of this up because that's our dilemma sometimes here in the minus world. Remember, we're in a glitched world. This list of objects is built from reading somewhere completely different in memory that is not supposed to be level data. So things are not in a logical order here. Sometimes an object which is farther to the right comes earlier in the list, and that's the case with this buzzy beetle. This buzzy beetle, man, it ruined everything. It appears in the list before this firebar, which that one would actually be 1 block too far away from Bowser, so I guess that's fine. But the beetle is also in the list before these 2 Koopas. And it would have been really nice if they spawned, since, you know, we need a Koopa for Ace. And of course, Bowser is listed before these other 3 Koopas, so they can't help us out. This is a nightmare. There's so much stuff right here. We really can't fill up enough slots. I showed this situation to a few other speedrunners of this game, and their first reaction was usually, oh, just turn one of those Koopas around. That's right. There are 3 Koopas which come just before this part. They show up a little too early, so they go off screen before Bowser loads in, but if we can turn one of them around, we're golden. So, how do we turn enemies around? We're underwater, so we can't just stomp on them, but there is a mechanic in this game where you can turn enemies around by taking damage. I've read in developer interviews that they wanted to make it look like Koopas were biting Mario, so they had them turn to face him. So yeah, if you run into them from behind, they'll turn around and continue walking toward you. Let's do that to get these Koopas to follow us to the right. It didn't work? Is this some kind of sick joke? We are this close to making Ace happen in the original Super Mario Bros., and these Koopas just won't turn around? Because apparently, enemies will never turn around when you're underwater. Why? My initial thought was, oh, it would be weird if you turned the Cheep Cheeps around in water levels. But Cheep Cheeps never turn around regardless, even if you somehow encountered one not underwater. I think this is, unfortunately, just a byproduct of the way they wrote the code for taking damage from enemies. See, when you touch an enemy, the game needs to decide whether you should stomp on that enemy or not. It checks if it's a spiny or a piranha plant, you know, the type of enemies that you shouldn't be able to stomp. And it also checks if you're underwater to prevent you from stomping enemies underwater. If it is an underwater area, the game skips ahead to the code for you to take damage. The problem is, the code that makes enemies turn around when taking damage comes after this check. It gets skipped over. No matter what, enemies will not turn around if you're in an underwater area. Wow, that is really unfortunate. This was like the dream setup with the Koopas right here. But, okay, let's keep looking. There could be something else to do or some other way to pull this off. Like, if we could bring some previous enemy to the right, maybe it would turn the Koopas around. Good thinking, except enemies also don't turn each other around when underwater. Fine, in that case, let's just keep going past this Bowser. Let's defeat him with fire to free up all the slots and keep going. Maybe there's another Bowser somewhere later? Is that wishful thinking? Actually, it's not wishful thinking. There is a Bowser later. In fact, there's 4 Bowsers later, with a bunch of enemies around them. But somehow, none of these are green Koopas. There is just barely this Parakoopa though, which you can kill with a fireball, and then the falling Koopa shell actually has enemy ID 0, which works. This spot works. You genuinely can do Ace with this Bowser, which appears later in the level. The problem is that it comes much, much later in the level. Way too late. You can't get there because you run out of time on the clock. Are you serious? It's one thing after another. We are so close. All right, let's take a step back. What are our paths to victory at this point? We need either a way to have more time on the clock to get to the later Bowser, or a way to bring another enemy to the right on the earlier Bowser. For now, let's even forget about it being a Koopa. If we can fill up one more object slot with anything, the game will at least crash. And maybe there's another way to get Ace from that? It would at least be a start. Anyway, those are our 2 paths to making Ace happen. And this is where we were at when I finished my last video and said this. Thanks to the brilliance of 3Creepio, Ace is actually very close to happening in SMB1. And that's what I'm going to cover next. For a full breakdown of Ace in 2J and how it might be possible in SMB1, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. The situation here is so close and so crazy that I planned on making this video no matter what, but I didn't know how it was going to turn out by the time this video was done. All I knew was that we were going to try. Let me walk you through everything we tried, and now you can experience the same roller coaster that we've been on. Here we go, starting with possibilities to reach the later Bowser. First, we tried to think of ways we could maybe freeze the timer. If you can get really high above the screen, the timer stops, but there's no known way to get up this high. If you fall in a pit, the timer stops, but even if you could somehow get out of the pit, the timer will just restart. If you grab the flagpole, the timer stops. Now, you can't take damage from most things after you've grabbed the flagpole, but you can take damage from fire bars. We tried grabbing the flagpole, then taking damage from this fire bar. But again, the timer just restarts. I tried underflowing the timer by grabbing it at 0, hoping it would loop to 999 when it restarted. There's a similar glitch to this that can be done in castle stages. But it didn't work here. You just immediately die from having no time remaining. Another thing that can hit you after a flagpole is hammers. I tried having Mario overshoot the castle so he would walk for a while with the timer stopped, and then take damage from a hammer to gain control again. This lets you get quite a bit farther, and you might even be able to reach where the Bowser is, but all your object slots get clogged up along the way, and you also wouldn't have the Fire Flower to shoot the Koopa at the end. Alright, well, if we can't reach the Bowser near the end in time, maybe we could bring the Bowser near the end to us. This sounds like a pretty outlandish idea, but wouldn't you know it, there is actually a glitch for this. In 2-player mode, if one player dies while climbing a vine, then a vine will grow when the next player loads in. In underwater levels, this actually causes a bug where the object list gets messed up. It starts reading the list much later than normal. So essentially, enemies will appear sooner in the level than they otherwise would. This actually gives us some very interesting prospects. You know the Bowser with the 3 Koopas near it? Now it spawns shortly after the flagpole, and the Koopas spawn right between these blocks at the castle. One of them runs into the blocks and turns around. A Koopa walking to the right and a Bowser right here? Sounds like the dream. The problem is, this time around, this is the first Bowser we run into. We haven't set the glitch up yet. We can do the overflow glitch on this Bowser, but we still need another one. And now, there's that monstrous gap before the later Bowser shows up. We do have a lot of extra time here because we can start the level from the midway when doing the vine glitch, and this Bowser shows up a lot earlier because of the vine messing with the object list. Thanks to all of that, I got very close, but died about 5 seconds away from reaching Bowser. No way. Isn't this crazy, guys? This seems so possible, and we have ways to do a lot of what we need, but it just doesn't quite work out. We somehow have a glitch which literally moves this Bowser at the end closer to us, but it's barely not close enough. We also have green Koopas near this Bowser now, but we're not set up for the ace yet. Okay, but I'm not giving up. Those are the ways of trying to reach the later Bowser. Now let's make attempts at the other path to victory, bringing an extra enemy with us to the earlier Bowser. Again, I'll take anything at this point, even if it's not a green Koopa. The main challenge here is there's just not a lot to work with. All the enemies which we could bring to the right, like this blooper for example, seem to come just a moment too late. Before that, we have some Paracoopas, which we can't stomp since we're underwater. If we could, they'd follow us to the right. Then there's this Hammer Brother. These guys actually will start charging at you if you wait around long enough, but only to the left. They won't go to the right because of course they won't. Later on in the level, there are a few of these platforms which move to the right after you step on them, but they all come after the Bowser. All the ones earlier in the level are the kind that just fall down. Another method of turning enemies around is to be on the right side of them when they land on the ground. We can get really far to the right side of the screen, and then any enemy that spawns in the air will turn toward us when it lands on the ground. There are a lot of enemies floating up in the air, so that seems pretty useful. Except, most of those are later in the level. Or these 2 Koopas near the Bowser, which again, never spawn. Then there's this Buzzy Beetle, which we can turn around, but it's already right next to Bowser, so that doesn't help. And finally, there's this Goomba. We can be on the right side of this Goomba when it lands. Except, Goombas are like the one enemy that doesn't turn to follow you when landing on the ground. How is this real? Okay, so taking a step back, the overall problem here is not having enough slots full when we get to Bowser, right? And we don't have enough slots full because we kill this Bowser to wipe them all clean. So another path to victory could be if we can avoid killing this earlier Bowser and still have slots open for the later Bowser. This basically means having things on screen when the Bowser loads in, which will then go off screen once we pass him and free up slots. With some effort, we can get this firebar to load in and still get the overflow glitch at Bowser. Now, when that firebar goes off screen, it frees up a slot. That should leave one open slot we can load the later Bowser into, and that should be it. Oh, hello there, princess. Guess what? She instantly eats up this free slot and never unloads. Fine, I figured out how to get these 2 firebars spawned in, hoping we could have 2 free slots open after Bowser, and 1 still open after the princess. But you're not gonna believe this. This first firebar goes off screen right before Bowser loads in. If this firebar was 1 block to the right, this would work. Come on. Well, wait, what about this long firebar right here? That could take up 2 slots on its own. Or can't it itself be used for the overflow glitch? Well, it could, if it ever spawned. We got horrible luck here again, and Bowser is in the list before this long fire bar, so it will never appear. The one long fire bar in the entire level is on the same screen as Bowser, and never spawns in. If it did, this would work. This section right here is so unfortunate. There's even more ideas I've tried and ways this is super close, but I can't even include them all in this video. It's seriously so absurd looking at this level that it doesn't work. Again, there's so many objects around this Bowser, including 8 Koopas, but we can't get any of them on screen. There's 4 Bowsers later, but we can't reach them. If this beetle wasn't out of order in the list, or if these Koopas were a little farther to the right, or if this princess wasn't here, or a multitude of other things, we'd be in good shape. These are the kinds of things 3Creepio and I would just rant back and forth to each other about, as we would try to make this thing work. Ugh. If this Goomba was any other enemy... Wait, huh? If it was any other enemy, we can make it another enemy. After you beat the game and play the new quest that Peach presents you with, all Goombas become Buzzy Beetles. Creepio, you're a genius. This is 100% going to work. We can play through the game to activate Quest 2, and actually, beating the Minus World on this version also triggers Quest 2, so that will be a lot faster than playing through World 8. And then yeah, once in Quest 2, we'll go back to the Minus World, use one of several options to be on the far right side of the screen, and then the Goomba will be a Buzzy Beetle, which will follow us to the right. This is not sounding like it will be super fast for a speedrun, but at this point, we just want to pull off Ace in Super Mario Bros. That alone would be huge. Okay, let's bring it over to Bowser, and there it is. The most beautiful crash screen I've seen in my life. Well, wait, now what? We don't have a Koopa on screen. This doesn't necessarily mean we can do Ace, because the glitched object doesn't overwrite a Koopa. So where does it go? It'll go wherever the first 0 is in memory, and that can be a few different places depending on what's happening on screen. For example, check out what happens if Mario is walking on the ground when we reach the crash. Ooh, pretty. That's an interesting result. This happens because one of the next spots in memory is Mario's action state, and walking on the ground is state 0, so the 84 goes there. Now, remember that big table I talked about earlier, which uses enemy IDs to know what code to jump to? Well, there's a different table that uses Mario's action state to know what code to jump to. If he's swimming, go to the swimming code. If he's climbing, go to the climbing code. You get the idea. Mario's action state can normally be a number from 0 to 3, but we just made it 84. You can probably guess what happens next. This goes out of bounds, the game finds a completely different number from normal to decide where to jump to, and this does indeed jump to somewhere unusual. Alright, this is our chance, but it's not going to be easy, because this time, the place it jumps to is not RAM. The place we're executing code now is called the PPU registers. This area of memory is used to control anything relating to the graphics, like drawing the background, scrolling the screen, stuff like that. What's actually here in memory changes wildly. It all depends on what is being drawn on the screen at that exact moment. Without getting too technical, just know that this area of memory will be very chaotic to work with. In fact, we're gonna need some help to figure this out. So I call in 100th Coin. There's no one better for the job right now. He's worked on other Ace projects, as I mentioned earlier. He knows how the NES works inside and out. And it just so happens that right before all of this went down, 100th Coin's other recent projects have required them to learn specifically about PPU behavior and this region of memory. I catch them up to speed on the whole situation, and that's when 100th Coin informs us that this is going to be hard to test, because most emulators don't actually emulate the behavior of this PPU stuff perfectly. That's how niche and technical we're getting here. So, 100th Coin's first order of business is working on making emulators more accurate, so whatever solution we find will be a real solution that works properly on original hardware. And in the meantime, I also bring SBD Wolf on board, Another really brilliant mind in these situations, SPD Wolf pretty much single-handedly cracked Ace in Castlevania a couple years ago. So yeah, I give SPD Wolf the rundown, and now, with the Ace Avengers assembled, they go to work. And boy, did they get busy. 100th Coin got emulators working accurately and has been trying to figure out all the possibilities of what numbers can be here in the PPU registers, or in other words, what instructions we can make the game run. We get an initial idea of some of the instructions we can run, and everyone is bouncing ideas around of approaches we could take. But one small hurdle to overcome is basically everything ends with the game crashing. This group chat is a sea of jargon and technical ideas being thrown out, but nothing is seeming to land. They're working hard, trying to find some path that doesn't crash, some way to jump to another area of memory that's better to work with, just something, but no luck. SPD Wolf brings up a really interesting idea though. We could just let the game crash, and then push the reset button. Because we're playing on the Famicom Disk System version, we have a unique opportunity here. The way the disk system works is it loads the game off of the disk and into this adapter that you plug into the cartridge slot. With a normal cartridge, you can't modify the data that physically exists inside the cartridge. But here, we can modify the data that's loaded inside this adapter. Essentially, this means we could run instructions which make one tiny change to the game before it crashes, and then press reset, and that change will still be there. And maybe with one of these changes in place, that could lead to Ace? Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just see if this idea works at all. Up to this point, they've kind of been doing everything by hand, so they're not sure what all the possibilities are that we can do. But they have found one that should do something pretty interesting at least. One of the instructions we can run looks like it will corrupt this routine, which is related to the screen scrolling. So when we scroll the screen, the game will probably crash. It looks like it should work, but now to make it happen for real. We set things up using the exact height of the blooper to affect what data is in the PPU registers at the moment the game crashes. We reset the game. Now, when Mario walks to the right, the screen will scroll and we'll see what happens. It crashes. The idea worked. And, at this point, we have actually technically done Ace. One single instruction of Ace. There it is, Ace in SMB1, guys. Woo, we did it. Well, it's a start at least. The next step was to verify that this works properly on console. I have a device that lets me replay inputs, so everything we just did to test this on emulator, I can play it back on a real NES. So, using that, I confirmed that it works. This is really fun to mess around with, and with each crash, the screen starts to look crazier and crazier. If nothing else happens from here, I was glad to at least have this to show you. We're certainly doing a glitch that has never been done before. But hey, we haven't tested all the possibilities yet. Let's keep looking now. I mean, even this crash might lead to something, but also there are more possibilities to explore with other changes we can make to the game by having different values in the PPU memory. At this point, 100th Coin was able to generate a list of all the possible instructions we could run which would have an impact on the game, and we started looking through to see what all of these would do. Most of them are pretty inconsequential. They change one block in a level, or just move an enemy or a platform or something. Some of them mess up the music. This one makes a foot appear above Mario when he dies. Very exciting. A few of them, though, are more interesting. This one corrupts all of the places where pits should be in the ground. This one makes Mario appear up in the air, even though he actually still interacts with things on the ground. And this one makes coins rain from the sky. These are pretty fun glitches, but so far, nothing that's going to help our cause. That is, until 3Creepio spots it. Or, wait, never mind. I guess it was useless. Just kidding, apparently it could be something big. I'm telling you, this whole thing was such a roller coaster to go through. Anyway, Creepio eventually reports back on what he found. One of the possibilities is an instruction which corrupts this routine, which is used to update the digits at the top of the screen. Initially, he thought it was useless. We don't care if, like, the score gets messed up or the coin counter doesn't work properly. But wait, this actually also affects the timer in the top right. No way, it never ticks down. This is the infinite time trick we've been looking for. What are the odds? We are so pumped up at this discovery. With this, we should be able to reach the Bowser that's way far into the Minus World and have a Koopa on screen this time to do a real, proper ace. We do realize one obstacle to overcome, and that's that, well, the timer doesn't tick down, which means we actually can't beat any levels. The game gets stuck waiting for the timer to tick down at the end. So how are we going to get back to the Minus World? Well, there's a continue feature built into the game. If you hold A before pressing start, you'll start back on the furthest world you've reached. Since we already beat the Minus World to make it to Quest 2, the Minus World is the farthest world we've reached. So we can just go back to the Minus World straight from the title screen. We're good. I can't believe it. It's actually happening. With infinite time, we just have to swim all the way to this Bowser, fireball the Paracoopa, and we will have finally done it. Oh, dude, no way. We were so close, but we forgot. When we come back here from the title screen, we won't have the fire flower. We need that. The only thing standing in our way is having a fire flower here, or one single flagpole. The infinite timer that makes Ace possible in Minus World prevents us from completing 1-1 and getting back to the Minus World with a fire flower. It's our fault for jumping the gun a little bit, but still sad. There's no way we're gonna get another chance like that. Simplistic points out that if we're Luigi, there's actually a few more possibilities for what outcomes we can get. I think the odds are pretty low we get another huge opportunity like the infinite timer, but we may as well check these out. Creepio notices that one of them corrupts a routine related to power-ups, so that one could maybe do something. This is so fortunate, guys. After so many close ideas not working out, we finally caught a break. Something did actually work. Ace is possible in Super Mario Bros. Let me summarize everything that makes it happen. First, we need to be on Quest 2, so the Goomba is a Buzzy Beetle. The fastest way to do this is by beating the Minus World itself. Then, we need to make a trip back to the Minus World as Luigi. So, we pick 2-player game, die as Mario, and then run there as Luigi. We collect power-ups on the way. We get past the flagpole in the Minus World, we get the overflow glitch on the first Bowser, and defeat him to free up object slots. We make sure to be on the right side of the screen to turn this Buzzy Beetle around. From there, we make sure Luigi is on the ground when Bowser loads, so the glitched object overwrites his action state, and code execution jumps to the PPU registers. We make sure the data here at this exact moment gives us the right value, and we do this by using the height of the blooper on screen. This makes a 1 byte, or in other words, a very small, change to the game, which will remain when we hit reset. This change corrupts the routine of power-ups, so when they come out of blocks, we get a jump to RAM. And from here, we're kinda home free. We can control what instructions the game runs, because we can control what numbers are in memory when it arrives here. We're also already really close to the spot in memory where your current controller inputs are stored, so the number that will be here depends on what buttons you're holding on the controller. If we get here, we basically have total control over what instructions we can make the game run. We just have to make sure the game doesn't crash before reaching this point. Things like the background scenery of the level will affect this and can cause a crash. But if we set up memory perfectly by picking a level with a good background scenery value, moving enemies to good locations, scrolling the screen to a good spot, and moving Mario to a good spot, then we can make this happen. There you have it. We win. I know it looks pretty weird. If you don't like this, we could tell the game to load us into the very last room of 8-4 instead. And we can make Mario swim in the air. We can do whatever we want. The point of Ace is that it's awesome. At the end of the day, it's not meant to compete with regular runs. It's just amazing that it works at all. But speaking of competing with regular runs, the time that all of this takes is 5:15. About 20 seconds slower than beating the game normally. Ace in 2J saved 20 seconds. In this game, it loses 20 seconds. If someone can figure out how to set up the glitch in Minus World without power-ups, we could avoid running through 1-1 and 1-2 with Luigi, and that would save a bunch. Or better yet, figure out how to do this in Quest 1, and that will save minutes. It is insanely close, after all, but you already know that because you watched me talk about it for half an hour. Well, we'll see what happens with this in the future. What's important right now is we did it! I'm so happy to report that Ace exists in Super Mario Bros., and this works on completely original hardware. Here it is working right now. This was quite the journey. Sure, we got really unlucky at certain points, but we also did get lucky at others. Yeah, this Buzzy Beetle is super annoying, preventing the Koopas from spawning, but honestly, we're lucky that this Bowser wasn't prevented from spawning, or that there even is a Bowser here, or a Minus World in the first place. We're lucky that this is on the Famicom Disk System version, where we can reset and keep the changes that happen from the glitch. And we're of course very fortunate that this power-up corruption led to Ace. Alright, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for coming on this journey with me all the way to the end. I know it was long, but this story needed to be told, and this was about as short as I could make it. And there were even more details I could have shared. I'm going to be releasing a video on my Patreon covering some more interesting details, or things we tried in the Minus World that were close. Okay, now just a couple final thoughts. First, I want to give a big shout out to those who helped make this possible, especially the top 3 contributors. 3Creepio, 100th Coin, and Simplistic. And an extra shout out to 100th Coin. If you're curious about the more technical details of all of this, he's currently working on a video that will talk a bit more about this, among other very technical things about this game. And finally, you can expect some fun demonstration videos coming out from this soon, like a full game task for speed, and other tasks which just show fun things you can do with this. For example, like I said, the possibilities are endless. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.